Ilara awoke to the faint hum of machinery vibrating through the floor. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the dim metallic light filtering through the small viewing window of her chamber. She was lying on a cold metal slab, her wrists and ankles restrained by alien energy cuffs that pulsed faintly with a bluish glow. Her head throbbed from the impact of the stun gun that had rendered her unconscious, and every instinct in her body screamed for movement. But there was nothing she could do, at least, not yet. The room around her was sterile and intimidating. Dark panels stretched across the walls and soft mechanical noises echoed like distant whispers. A faint scent of ionized air and metal filled the space. Through the small viewport, she could see figures moving in the hallway beyond. Towering silhouettes that carried weapons far beyond anything humans had. Alien soldiers, she thought, their armor glinting with strange energy lines that pulsed in rhythm with their steps. One of them paused at the door to her chamber, tilting its head as if sensing her presence. Its eyes glowed a piercing amber through the helmet, and its sharp, angular features were twisted into a mocking expression. "You awake, human?" the alien said, its voice harsh but oddly melodic. "I wondered if you would last another cycle in this cell. You look fragile." Ilara's lips twitched into a faint smile, almost imperceptible, as she met its gaze. "Fragile?" she whispered under her breath. Her voice was soft, barely carrying, but it contained a quiet confidence. She studied the alien carefully, noting the rhythm of its movements, the way its armor responded to light, the subtle energy patterns around its weapon. Every detail was important. Every detail could be a weakness. The alien snorted and turned away, motioning to the others. "Keep her restrained. Do not let her touch the systems. She is nothing." Ilara's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the thrill of observation. She had trained for moments like this, times when brute force was useless and the mind became the ultimate weapon. Her people had prepared her for the unthinkable, for situations where survival depended not on strength, but on creativity, patience, and intellect. Her chamber had a small control interface embedded into the wall near her head. At first glance, it appeared to be a monitor, displaying nothing but alien glyphs that made no sense, but Ilara could sense its purpose. The device was a window into the ship's systems, a way to communicate with the semi-autonomous AI that ran much of the vessel's operations. Her fingers itched to reach it, to test the boundaries of control. But she restrained herself. Patience, she reminded herself. Patience and observation. The first hours passed slowly. The aliens returned intermittently to mock her, each visit a reminder of their physical superiority. They laughed at her small human frame, at her restraints, and at the concept that she might somehow be more than they expected. Each sneer, each cruel remark sharpened her focus. She began to notice patterns. The aliens' energy shields fluctuated at regular intervals, their patrols followed predictable paths, and the ship's systems had minor glitches that repeated in cycles. Small things, almost imperceptible, but they were there. Even in their arrogance, the aliens had created a ship that obeyed rules, and rules could be exploited. By the second cycle, Ilara had memorized the hum of the ventilation ducts, the timing of the doors, the subtle vibrations that signaled when a soldier approached. She could predict movement before it happened, and she began to form a plan, not yet to escape, but to understand, to manipulate, and to turn the ship itself into an ally. Her thoughts drifted for a moment to her homeworld. The planet had been quiet, ordinary, and peaceful before the invasion. Humans were not known for interstellar warfare. They were adaptable, yes, but not technologically advanced on the scale of the aliens. And yet, in their simplicity, lay ingenuity. She had been trained to think creatively, to improvise when no clear solution existed. That training, that human resilience, was her advantage. The aliens returned again, this time dragging a device that buzzed and clicked. It was a scanner, meant to analyze her brain activity, to map her thought patterns, and perhaps predict her next move. They placed it over her temples, its cold sensors pressing against her skin. She felt a twinge of fear, but she focused on the ship, on the subtle vibrations, on the soft hum of systems that she could begin to influence. The scanner whirred to life. A voice, calm and mechanical, announced something in alien speech. Elara could not understand the words, but she could understand the purpose. They were trying to read her mind, to quantify her intellect, and to categorize her as a potential threat or a trivial curiosity. She let herself smile. Let them read what they wanted. Let them believe she was helpless. And then she began her work. Using slight movements, almost imperceptible, she brushed her fingers against the small interface near her head. Nothing happened at first, but she had memorized the symbols during her brief observation periods, and with careful pressure she activated a small subsystem. A light blinked on the interface, a minor success, invisible to the aliens, but it gave her hope. The ship's AI, though programmed for alien control, responded to logic patterns, sequences of commands, and the human mind was capable of creating patterns the AI had never encountered. Ilara's fingers danced across the controls, sending signals that mimicked the alien commands, yet contained subtle human logic. She activated a minor system, a door unlocked in a distant corridor. It clicked softly, but the aliens were distracted and did not notice. She felt a thrill of victory tempered by caution. The AI was an ally waiting to be awakened, but it was unpredictable. One wrong move, one display of her capabilities, and the aliens would increase the restraints, perhaps neutralize the AI entirely. Every move had to be calculated, subtle, invisible. Hours turned into cycles. The aliens continued their patrols, mocking her at every opportunity. "You cannot control this ship, human," one of them sneered, towering above her slab. "You are weak. You are nothing. You belong in this cell." Ilara's eyes gleamed. Perhaps they believed that. Perhaps they underestimated what it meant to be human. While they relied on brute force, she relied on observation. While they trusted only their strength, she trusted ingenuity. During a brief moment when the room was empty, she focused entirely on the interface. She discovered that certain commands could override minor protocols, lights, doors, minor security drones. With careful attention, she manipulated the system. A light blinked. A panel slid slightly. A small drone shifted in its charging bay. None of it was overt. None of it drew attention. But it was the beginning. She allowed herself a moment to breathe. Each minor success built confidence. Each small manipulation was a message to herself. She was not helpless. She was not a prisoner in the true sense. She was an observer, a strategist, a mind capable of bending the ship to her will, if she could only continue carefully. Then came a new sound, footsteps heavier than before, synchronized with a low hum that made the floor vibrate. A large figure entered, flanked by two soldiers, the captain. She could sense his authority immediately. His armor was more intricate, adorned with energy filaments that glowed with power. His presence made the room colder, more oppressive, but Ilara did not flinch. "You amuse me, human," he said, his voice resonant and commanding. "We have observed your attempts at interaction with the systems. Do you really think you can understand what you are touching?" Ilara's heart raced, but she maintained her calm. "I am learning," she said simply. The words were honest, but they carried subtle defiance. The captain circled her slowly, examining the restraints, the interface, and her expression. "Learning is pointless. You are a creature of flesh, not logic. The ship obeys logic. And us." A flicker of amusement crossed her mind. Logic. Yes, but logic could be bent, interpreted and redirected. The ship's AI was intelligent, yes, but not loyal, not truly. It could follow a sequence of commands, and she could provide those sequences invisibly, subtly, without alerting the aliens. For the first time, she allowed herself a measure of anticipation. This confrontation was not the end. It was the beginning. Every mockery, every taunt, every assumption made by the aliens was a weakness. Every overconfidence, every predictable patrol, every assumption of human inferiority was a crack she could exploit. The captain leaned close, his glowing eyes piercing her. "Do not think you are clever, human. You are trapped, and your mind is nothing compared to the power here." Ilara met his gaze evenly. "We shall see," she whispered, a calm determination in her voice that belied her situation. As the captain departed, satisfied that he had reminded her of her inferiority, Ilara returned her focus to the interface. The first successes were minor, almost laughable to anyone else, but she knew they were significant. A door here, a light there, a small drone activated remotely. Each tiny victory was a thread in the web she was weaving. She closed her eyes briefly and allowed herself a thought. The ship could be hers. Not by force, but by intelligence, by patience, by understanding. The aliens had mocked her for being human, for being fragile, for being small. But humans, she reflected, were unpredictable. Humans were clever. Humans adapted. And in the cold, metallic halls of the alien ship, a single mind, disciplined and focused, could turn the tables. Ilara opened her eyes. The chamber was quiet once more, the hum of the ship the only companion she needed. She had no illusions about the danger ahead. The aliens were powerful, the ship formidable, and the odds against her were immense. But she had patience, observation, and a mind that refused to yield. And that was enough. The first cycles of captivity had taught Ilara more than fear ever could. Every vibration of the floor, every pulse of light in the corridors, every hum of the ship's machinery was now a message she could read. She had memorized patrol schedules, energy fluctuations, and the faint sounds of the ventilation ducts. Each detail added a layer to her understanding. She was no longer a prisoner. She was a strategist quietly mapping her battlefield. Ilara's fingers hovered over the small interface near her head. The panel had become familiar, almost like an extension of her own thoughts. The alien symbols that once seemed meaningless now revealed patterns, commands embedded within sequences that the ship's AI recognized. She had already manipulated minor systems, the opening of a door here, a faint shift in lighting there, but she needed more. She needed control. The chamber's door slid open with a hiss, and two alien soldiers entered, their armor gleaming with energy lines that pulsed in synchronization with their movements. They carried small devices meant to monitor her every action, but they underestimated her focus. "You have spent too long observing," one of them said, its voice a low growl. "You should accept your helplessness." Ilara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Observation is the first step to understanding," she replied, calm and measured. Her voice carried no fear, only clarity. She had learned that confidence, even in the smallest doses, could unnerve the aliens more than any weapon. They raised their scanners toward her, but before they could activate them, a faint click echoed from the far corner of the chamber. One of the alien soldiers paused, looking around. The interface had registered a minor command, a simple test, but the AI responded instantly. A panel shifted slightly, unnoticed by the intruders. Ilara's mind raced, connecting threads in patterns the aliens could never perceive. Each sequence of signals she sent was like a whisper to the ship's AI, a subtle code embedded within the routines it already followed. She realized she could manipulate more than doors and lights. She could guide drones, access communications, and perhaps even influence life support in distant sections. The possibilities were expanding, limited only by her patience and precision. The aliens left, apparently satisfied that she had not made a significant move, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Ilara could sense it in the slight hesitation of their steps, the almost imperceptible tilt of their heads. They were confident, but no confidence was perfect. Flaws existed, and she intended to find them all. In the quiet that followed, Ilara worked tirelessly. She sent minor commands to the ship's AI, each one building a foundation. A drone moved slightly from its charging station. A distant airlock clicked as though testing itself. Lights dimmed and brightened in patterns that seemed random but were under her subtle control. None of it drew the attention of the aliens, yet each action was a thread woven into a larger plan. Hours passed. Ilara's mind remained sharp, her focus unbroken. She had learned to read the faint vibrations through the floor, the soft hum of the ventilation, and the low whirring of the power conduits. These were more than sounds. They were signals. Every system had a rhythm, every patrol a predictable cadence. She could anticipate movement, time her actions, and exploit gaps the aliens never noticed. During one brief moment of solitude, she allowed herself to reflect. Her homeworld had trained her well, instilling in her the value of resourcefulness over brute strength, strategy over force. Humans had always been underestimated in the galaxy. Too often, other species judged them by physical limitations, by appearances, by the simplicity of their technology compared to advanced civilizations. But adaptability, creativity, and resilience were human weapons, far sharper than any sword or plasma rifle. Ilara's fingers moved with precise intention over the interface. She accessed a subsystem controlling minor maintenance drones. She issued simple, subtle commands. Move to Corridor B, observe, and report only to local AI node. The drones obeyed, their systems now partially under her guidance. Through them, she could gather information, track patrols, and even influence the aliens' perception of the ship's environment. A sharp sound interrupted her work, a low thrum that vibrated through the floor. The chamber door opened, and the captain of the alien soldiers entered, flanked by a pair of heavily armed guards. He was larger than the others, his armor adorned with glowing filaments that pulsed with authority. His presence made the air heavier, his steps echoing with power and command. "You continue to amuse me," he said, his voice resonant and deliberate. "Your attempts at control are interesting, but futile. You cannot bend this ship to your will. It obeys logic, and logic obeys us." Ilara met his gaze steadily. "Logic is predictable," she said. "Predictability can be used." The captain's amber eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation breaking through his calm. He circled her slowly, studying the restraints, the interface, and her expression. "You think like a strategist, but you are still a human. Flesh and bone cannot command steel and energy. You are weak." A small smile crossed Ilara's face. Weakness, she thought, was a perception, not a truth. She allowed the captain to linger, his confidence bolstering her own determination. She had observed him, noted the pattern of his speech, the rhythm of his steps, and even the subtle shifts in the AI's response when he was near. He was powerful, but predictable, and predictability was a tool she could wield. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the captain finally left, satisfied with his demonstration of dominance. The room was silent once more, and Ilara returned to her interface. The minor manipulations she had made earlier were building into something larger. The drones now followed her subtle commands. The doors responded, and small lights blinked in sequences she had programmed. Each minor success strengthened her connection to the ship, each step invisible to the aliens. She knew the next phase required careful planning. Direct confrontation was impossible. The aliens' strength and numbers were overwhelming. She needed to turn the environment against them, to use the ship itself as a weapon without revealing her hand too soon. Every drone, every door, every system she controlled was a piece of the puzzle. Patience would be the key, and she had plenty of it. Ilara closed her eyes briefly, imagining the ship as an extension of her mind. Each corridor, each chamber, each system pulsed with potential. She could influence the environment, guide the aliens' movements, and create opportunities they would never anticipate. Humans were underestimated, yes, but intelligence and ingenuity were powers even the most advanced species could not fully predict. She began running simulations in her mind, predicting how the aliens would respond to unexpected changes. What if a drone appeared in the corridor ahead, seemingly malfunctioning, yet subtly guiding the aliens into a trap? What if a door locked unexpectedly, forcing them to alter their patrol patterns? What if lighting flickered in a way that disoriented them just enough for her to slip past unnoticed? Every possibility was a thread she could weave into a tapestry of control. Hours melted into cycles. Ilara's concentration remained unbroken. Her mind worked like a finely tuned machine, processing the ship's rhythms, the aliens' behaviors, and the subtle signals of the AI. She was no longer a passive observer. She was a strategist in command of invisible forces, a conductor orchestrating a symphony the aliens could not hear. During a rare quiet moment, she allowed herself to smile. The AI responded to logic, yes, but it did not understand loyalty. It could follow sequences, patterns, and subtle commands, and she could provide them. She had discovered, through careful observation, that even minor inconsistencies in the aliens' commands could be exploited. Every error, every hesitation, every assumption of human inferiority was a potential advantage. Suddenly, a new sound echoed through the chamber, a soft, mechanical chime that vibrated through the floor. Ilara's eyes widened slightly as she realized what it meant. One of the minor commands she had issued earlier had successfully influenced the AI in a more significant way than she had anticipated. A maintenance drone had moved autonomously, bypassing its normal routines, and was now positioning itself strategically in the hallway beyond her chamber. The implications were enormous. She was no longer limited to minor manipulations. She could now influence autonomous units throughout the ship, guiding their actions in subtle, controlled ways. The aliens would notice anomalies, yes, but they would not immediately understand the source. And while they searched for explanations, she could continue building her advantage. Ilara's mind raced. Each decision had to be precise. One misstep, one overt signal, and the aliens would clamp down, neutralizing both her and the AI. But she had patience, she had intelligence, and she had the advantage of being underestimated. As the next cycle began, the captain returned, accompanied by a larger group of soldiers. They intended to assert dominance, to remind her of her captivity, and perhaps to intimidate her into submission. But this time, Ilara was ready. She had not yet acted overtly, but she was preparing. The AI was now partially responsive, drones were positioned strategically, and minor systems awaited her command. She had begun the first threads of control, threads that could unravel the alien's confidence if she acted at the right moment. The captain's eyes narrowed as he observed her calm demeanor. "Still confident, human? You should feel fear. You are powerless here." Ilara's gaze remained steady. "Power is not always measured by strength," she replied softly. "Sometimes it is measured by understanding." A flicker of doubt passed through the captain's expression, brief, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Even the smallest uncertainty could be exploited. Ilara had learned that humans, though physically weaker, had a unique weapon: the ability to think creatively, to adapt, and to act unpredictably. And that weapon, she realized, could tip the balance even in the face of overwhelming odds. The captain left once more, confident in his superiority. Ilara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first phase of her plan was underway. The ship was no longer simply a prison. It was a battlefield, a puzzle she could manipulate, and a weapon she could control. The aliens had mocked her, called her weak, and assumed she was helpless. They were wrong. Ilara turned back to the interface, her fingers moving with renewed determination. She would continue building her influence over the ship, guiding the AI and drones, and preparing for the moment when she could act openly. Patience, observation, and intelligence had brought her this far. The next phase would require courage, timing, and decisive action. And Ilara was ready. Ilara had spent countless cycles observing, learning, and quietly shaping the environment around her. The ship, once a prison, had begun to respond to her subtle commands. Lights dimmed and brightened, drones moved on quiet patrols under her guidance, and doors shifted imperceptibly to redirect the aliens' movements. She was no longer invisible to the AI. She had become its guide, its mind within a mind. But the next step required courage. The captain returned again, flanked by his soldiers. His expression was unreadable, but Ilara sensed the faintest trace of suspicion. Something about the ship's subtle changes had begun to worry him. He scanned the chamber, his glowing eyes sweeping over every surface, every device. "You persist, human," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "You continue to manipulate things beyond your understanding. Do you not fear the consequences?" Ilara's hands rested lightly on the restraints, though she could have removed them easily with the right commands. "I understand consequences," she said, calm and measured. "I also understand opportunity." The captain stepped closer, his armored boots echoing on the floor. "Opportunity? You are trapped. The ship obeys logic and loyalty. Neither can be bent by flesh and bone." Ilara smiled faintly, though the smile did not reach her eyes. "Logic can be interpreted. Patterns can be rearranged." He paused, noting the confidence in her voice. Confidence. Humans had it in strange ways, often when they were most powerless. It was unpredictable. He dismissed the thought and signaled his soldiers to leave. As the chamber door slid shut, Ilara turned fully to the interface. This was the moment she had prepared for, though she had to act carefully. She could no longer rely on minor manipulations. The AI now responded more openly, and the drones were positioned strategically throughout the corridors. Her plan could unfold, but only if she timed it perfectly. She sent a sequence of commands to the drones, instructing them to patrol a corridor just outside the captain's main control room. Their movements were precise, almost imperceptible, yet they created a small distraction, a minor anomaly that the aliens would notice but not immediately understand. Then she accessed the door controls. A series of locks and magnetic barriers engaged and disengaged subtly, guiding the aliens into patterns she had predicted. The lights flickered in sequences, drawing their attention toward areas where drones were already positioned. Her pulse quickened. This was the first phase of the open demonstration of her control. The aliens would notice the anomalies, but they would not suspect a human orchestrating them. A sharp alarm echoed in the chamber as the captain returned, his expression darkening. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Systems are malfunctioning." Ilara's lips curved into a slight smile. "Not malfunctioning," she replied softly. "Responding." The captain's eyes narrowed. He realized too late that the anomalies were not random. He barked orders, but the drones ignored him, following only the sequences Ilara had set. Doors locked and unlocked with precision, isolating small squads of soldiers from each other. Lights flickered, creating disorientation. The captain realized that the ship itself was working against him. Panic spread among the soldiers. Their confidence, once absolute, faltered. They had underestimated a human's ability to influence a system they believed belonged solely to them. Every step they took was anticipated, every movement subtly guided. Ilara moved her fingers across the interface, sending precise commands to the AI. Defense turrets, previously locked in standby mode, now rotated subtly, their sensors aligned with drones she controlled. The ship had become a weapon, though the aliens still did not understand who was wielding it. The captain roared, frustrated and furious. "This is impossible! A human cannot control the ship!" Ilara's eyes remained calm. "You assumed incorrectly." Using the AI, she created diversions. Doors sealed sections of corridors, forcing soldiers into isolated areas where drones could observe them without interference. Lights flickered in synchronization with minor alarms, confusing their sensors and making coordination difficult. The aliens moved as if the ship itself resisted them, and in many ways, it did, because she was guiding it. The first small confrontation occurred in a maintenance corridor. A patrol of alien soldiers encountered drones that appeared to operate autonomously. The soldiers attempted to disable them, but the drones moved unpredictably, blocking paths and herding them into areas where the lights flickered and doors shifted. The soldiers shouted in alarm, their confidence shaken. They had been trained to fight other species, but they had never faced a human capable of thinking beyond physical limitations. Ilara watched the displays, her mind calculating every outcome. Each anomaly she created was a controlled variable, a piece of a larger strategy. The aliens were strong, yes, but predictable. Their arrogance and reliance on brute force made them vulnerable. She had no weapon but her intellect, and it was proving more powerful than anything they had brought to bear. The captain tried to regain control. He issued commands to override the AI, but the sequences she had programmed anticipated his actions. Minor failures in the override allowed her to maintain control over sections of the ship. Even he could not fully predict her manipulations, and the gap between his confidence and reality widened. As the chaos spread, she used the AI to access communication systems. She intercepted messages from other sections of the ship, reading movements and strategies of alien squads. Every signal became an opportunity. Every piece of information allowed her to manipulate outcomes more precisely. Ilara realized that she could not just survive, she could dominate. She could make the aliens fight each other, stumble over the ship's defenses, and fall into patterns she had designed. And all of it would be invisible to them. A group of soldiers approached her chamber, their weapons raised, but she anticipated their movement. Using the AI, she triggered minor alarms and light changes in the corridors they were traversing. The soldiers paused, disoriented, and the drones she had positioned advanced strategically, blocking paths and herding them toward empty sections. It was subtle, but effective. The captain's frustration grew with every signal he received. He realized his soldiers were struggling, but he could not understand why. The ship's systems were supposed to obey him. Logic and loyalty were his tools, but they were failing him. Ilara watched carefully, noting each reaction, each hesitation, and each misstep. She was learning, adjusting, improving. The AI responded to her logic patterns, following sequences that the aliens could not predict. Every move strengthened her control, and every small victory gave her confidence. She realized that the final step required boldness. To truly turn the tide, she had to act openly, showing the aliens that she was in command. Until now, her actions had been invisible, subtle, almost imperceptible. But the time had come to escalate. Ilara accessed the main control systems, linking the AI, the drones, and the environmental controls. She began a sequence that would temporarily isolate the captain and his key soldiers, cutting them off from communications and support. Doors slid into place, lights dimmed, and minor alarms created confusion throughout the ship. The captain realized too late that he was trapped. His soldiers were disoriented, drones blocked corridors, and the ship itself seemed to act against him. His eyes widened as he looked toward Ilara, suddenly understanding that the human he had mocked was the source of this chaos. "You," he began, his voice rising in disbelief. "You control the ship?" Alara met his gaze steadily. "I am not just human," she said. "I am a strategist, and humans adapt." The captain's anger boiled over. He attempted to override the AI manually, but she had anticipated every action. Commands were intercepted, sequences altered, and the ship continued to respond to her. The power that had once belonged entirely to the aliens was now shared, subtly, strategically, with her. The first real confrontation reached a climax as the captain tried to physically reach her chamber. She had already prepared the corridors. Drones moved unpredictably, doors sealed and opened strategically, and lights created disorientation. He advanced, but each step was challenged by the systems she had manipulated. His soldiers struggled alongside him, frustrated and confused. Alara's heart pounded, but her mind remained calm. She was no longer a prisoner. She was the hidden force guiding the battlefield. Every decision she made was precise, every action intentional. The ship had become an extension of her mind, responding to her logic and strategy in ways the aliens could not comprehend. As the captain realized the full extent of her control, his confidence shattered. He had mocked her, ridiculed her, and assumed she was powerless. But the human he had underestimated had turned the very environment against him. The aliens' superiority, once absolute, now faltered under the weight of intellect, creativity, and patience. Alara allowed herself a small smile. This was only the beginning. She had proven that humans, though physically weaker, could triumph when strategy, observation, and ingenuity were applied. The ship was hers, in ways the aliens could not fully see, and the first major victory had been achieved. The captain retreated temporarily, regrouping his forces, but Alara knew that the battle had already shifted. The aliens had been forced to confront something they had not anticipated, a human mind capable of commanding systems, predicting movements, and turning every advantage against them. And Alara had only begun. Alara felt the hum of the ship beneath her hands, steady and responsive. The AI, once a silent overseer, now obeyed her subtle commands as if it recognized a mind capable of understanding its logic. The corridors around her were quiet, but the tension was palpable. The aliens were regrouping, attempting to regain control, yet every movement they made was anticipated and countered. Her first priority was to secure her immediate area. The drones she had guided into the corridors were positioned strategically, ready to delay any approaching patrols. Doors locked and unlocked in sequences she had designed, isolating alien soldiers in sections where they could do no harm. The lights flickered, creating subtle disorientation, and minor alarms echoed throughout the ship, giving the illusion of malfunction to the aliens. The captain appeared on the display screens, his amber eyes filled with fury. He barked commands into his communication devices, attempting to override the systems she had manipulated. But each sequence he tried to impose was intercepted, rerouted, and adapted by the AI under her guidance. The balance of power had shifted, and the captain's frustration was evident in every gesture. Alara allowed herself a small smile. Humans were underestimated, she thought. They judged strength by size and weaponry, not by ingenuity and patience. The aliens' confidence had been their greatest weakness. While they relied on brute force, she relied on strategy. While they assumed loyalty from the ship, she had discovered opportunity. And now, the first true test of her control was at hand. She sent commands to the maintenance drones, directing them to patrol sections closer to the captain's location. Their movement was subtle yet purposeful, her strategy unfolding like a carefully written sequence. Alien squads encountered the drones unexpectedly, disrupted by movements that seemed random but were anything but. Panic and confusion began to spread among the soldiers, their morale eroding with every obstacle. Ilara accessed the ship's environmental controls. Airlocks sealed in strategic corridors, forcing alien patrols into isolated areas. Lighting patterns created illusions of additional movement, amplifying the sense of chaos. Even minor alarms contributed to the perception that the ship itself had turned against them. She had crafted an environment where every action of the aliens played into her plan, where every move was anticipated and countered before it could have effect. The captain attempted to take direct action, moving toward her chamber with a small detachment of soldiers. She anticipated his path perfectly. Doors sealed behind him, drones blocked alternate routes, and lights flickered to create hesitation. The captain's advance was slowed, his confidence shaken. Every step he took was predicted, every action disrupted. Ilara's mind worked quickly, analyzing every data stream. Sensor reports, drone locations, power fluctuations, all were integrated into her mental map. She knew where every soldier was, where every threat could emerge, and how to manipulate the environment to maximize advantage. The ship was no longer a prison. It was a weapon in her hands, a battlefield she could control. She reached a critical decision point. The AI could now operate with full autonomy under her guidance, coordinating drones, doors, and environmental systems simultaneously. She began the final sequence. Communications between alien squads were subtly jammed, isolating units from each other. Doors and corridors rearranged their functions to guide the soldiers into traps she had set without ever showing her hand. Defense turrets, previously inert, now monitored key areas, ready to activate if the soldiers advanced. The captain realized the extent of the situation. His soldiers were trapped, separated, and disoriented. Drones moved unpredictably, guiding them into areas where they could do nothing. Turrets monitored corridors where no human should have influence. The ship itself seemed to defy his authority, and he understood with a shock that the human he had mocked was the cause. "You control everything," he said, disbelief and fury blending in his voice. "Impossible." Ilara's response was calm, precise. "Not impossible, just underestimated." The captain's attempt to override the systems failed repeatedly. Each time he issued a command, the AI adapted it to her pre-programmed sequences. She had anticipated every contingency, predicting his reactions with near-perfect accuracy. The alien's frustration grew into panic. His soldiers looking to him for guidance that no longer worked. Ilara allowed herself to think ahead. The next step required precision and courage. She needed to secure control over the ship's main corridors and command systems fully, while avoiding unnecessary risk to herself. Every movement of the AI, every door, every drone, had to be orchestrated perfectly. She gave the first order: all drones to key junctions, doors to lock selectively, and minor alarms to continue distracting and confusing the aliens. The captain attempted to rally his soldiers, shouting orders that were ignored or misinterpreted as the AI rerouted systems. Drones moved unpredictably, guiding soldiers into corridors where doors suddenly sealed behind them. Lights flickered in synchronization with minor alarms, creating hesitation and fear. The aliens' confidence collapsed under the pressure of an environment they no longer understood. Ilara's fingers moved deftly over the interface. She had synchronized the ship's AI, environmental systems, and drones into a single network under her indirect control. Every action she took rippled through the ship, creating advantages that the aliens could neither see nor anticipate. She sent the next command, activating the defense turrets in corridors where alien soldiers were trapped. Energy beams flashed, cutting off potential escape routes. The aliens attempted to fight back, but the AI redirected their attacks, and drones strategically positioned themselves to block paths. Every action of the humans within the system was perfectly calculated to maintain control and minimize risk. Panic became chaos. The captain's soldiers moved blindly, their coordination destroyed. Their superior physical strength meant nothing in a space they could not control, against a human mind directing every element of their environment. The captain tried to regroup, but his attempts were systematically undermined. The ship itself, guided by Ilara's strategy, became an insurmountable force. Ilara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Every prediction had been accurate, every movement anticipated. Humans were small, yes, and their technology limited compared to alien civilizations, but intellect, strategy, and patience could tip the scales in ways brute force could not. She had demonstrated that in the right hands, even a single human could control forces far beyond their physical capabilities. The captain finally realized that retreat was his only option. His soldiers were trapped in isolated corridors, drones blocked reinforcements, and defense turrets made any offensive maneuver deadly. The human who had once been a prisoner had become the master of the battlefield, and there was no immediate way to reverse the situation. Ilara accessed the ship's navigation system, setting a course away from the alien fleet. The ship obeyed her commands instantly, aligning itself to travel to safety. Her control was absolute within her current domain. She guided the AI to maintain order within the ship, keeping the aliens disoriented while ensuring that her path remained clear. The captain's final attempts at resistance were futile. He watched in disbelief as the ship's systems responded only to the commands he could not counter. His soldiers were scattered, confused, and fearful. They had mocked her as fragile, as weak, as powerless. And yet, she had turned the very ship they commanded against them. Ilara stood in her chamber, calm and focused, her mind fully integrated with the ship's AI. She was no longer a prisoner. She was the strategist, the orchestrator, the human who had turned an enemy vessel into her instrument of control. The aliens had underestimated her, and their arrogance had been their undoing. With the captain's retreat and his soldiers incapacitated, Ilara solidified her control over the ship. Drones patrolled key areas, environmental systems responded to her commands, and the defense mechanisms remained active to prevent any counterattack. She had created a fortress within the vessel, and the aliens were powerless to challenge it. The AI responded with subtle signals, almost as if acknowledging her command. Systems that had been rigid under alien control now operated with flexibility, guided by her logic and strategy. She had proven that intellect and patience could surpass strength and technology. Ilara allowed herself a final thought as she watched the stars through the viewport. Her people had always believed that humans were underestimated, but she had taken that belief further. She had demonstrated that a single human, armed with observation, strategy, and courage, could command forces far greater than their own physical capabilities. The ship sailed silently through the void, fully under her guidance, leaving behind the alien fleet she had outmaneuvered. The captain and his soldiers retreated, their arrogance shattered, their confidence broken. They had mocked her, assumed she was weak, and ignored the unpredictable power of human ingenuity. Ilara's mind was calm, her plan executed flawlessly. She had turned imprisonment into opportunity, helplessness into control. The ship itself, once a tool of her captors, had become a testament to human potential. She realized that humans, though small and limited compared to the galaxy's great civilizations, possessed something no one could predict: adaptability, intelligence, and courage. As the vessel moved toward safety, Ilara reflected on the journey. The victory was not just physical, but symbolic. It was a statement to any who underestimated humans that strength alone did not determine power. A single mind, focused and clever, could shape the course of events, even against overwhelming odds. Ilara allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, knowing that her people's resilience, her training, and her determination had all led to this outcome. The ship, responding to her commands, was proof that intellect and patience could triumph over brute force and arrogance. And as she gazed at the stars stretching before her, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Humanity had survived and prevailed, not because of strength, but because of ingenuity. And in the vast expanse of the galaxy, she realized, humans were capable of shaping their destiny in ways no one could anticipate. The alien fleet receded, their pride shattered, and Alara sailed onward. She was free, her ship under her command, and the universe full of possibilities. Humanity had been underestimated, and now she thought it was time for them to be respected. Her journey was only beginning, but one truth had been proven. A human mind, clever and determined, could change the course of fate itself, even among the stars.